People who have been discriminated for something they cannot control. What's your story? TLDR. Being poor in a rich neighborhood. When I was 16, a friend invited me and some other friends over to her house one night. Her dad was extremely wealthy and they lived in a really rich community. I had only been to her neighborhood one time before and that was when their house was being built. I drove an older truck, but it had a nice paint job. It was not busted up or anything like that. I got to the neighborhood and did a lap, trying to find something familiar, but nothing stood out. I did another lap and as I was halfway through I had red and blue lights in my rear view. A cop came up to me and was immediately crappy. He didn't ask me for my license or anything, but asked me what I was doing. I told him I was trying to get to a friend's house. He immediately scoffed and told me that numerous people had called the police department about a suspicious vehicle in the neighborhood. I had been there for maybe 15 minutes driving around. I apologized, but he told me he didn't think I was there to meet friends. I told him the last name of my friend and he laughed again like he didn't believe it. He told me that he was going to follow me to their house to make sure they knew me. He got back in his car and I called my friend and told her I was being followed by a cop to her house and if she could stand outside and wave me down because I had forgotten which house was hers. She did and her dad was waiting as well. I parked my truck and got out and the cop walked up with me. My friend's dad told me to go with his daughter into the house and then immediately got into a heated discussion with the cop. There were like 5 of us over at her house. I was definitely from the family with the lowest income and I had the oldest car in the driveway. I never drove to her house after that. I would always get rides from her or from friends. That really sucks. At least your friend and her dad were awesome about it. I have an ileostomy. Need to wear a bag. There are times where the bag needs emptying pretty damn quickly or more embarrassingly, it leaks so if I'm out I urgently need to use disabled toilets. I was in such a situation once but when I tried to go into the toilet, was challenged by a man in a wheelchair who shouted, "You don't look disabled." People nearby stopped talking and looked over towards us so I pulled up my t-shirt and showed him my bag. Crying shaking I hope you never have to wear one of these and promptly locked myself in the toilet to change my leaking bag. Yep, it was messy. I don't like going out much due to this. It's not my fault I have no bowel but please for anyone who thinks people must be in a wheelchair to use disabled loos, just consider invisible disabilities too. PTSD. People think it makes you explosive and become wary around you when they find out. Spoiler, if anything it makes you timid and likely to isolate. I'm a Chinese from Singapore. However, my father is an Indonesian Chinese and so my name sounds very Malay. As such it was extremely difficult for me to even get a part-time job during my school breaks. The agent had to call me up to clarify my race multiple times. I seriously considered changing my name. Racism is real in Singapore y'all. For your information, the majority demographic of Singapore is Chinese. Malays are stereotyped to be lazy. It's a bad world we live in. I guess for me, instead of being discriminated for my race, it's more that I've been discriminated because of my blindness. It's kind of been a thing that's happened throughout my life, and I definitely have been bullied and thought less of by people who thought less of me because I am blind. But I have tried to not let that affect me. Mostly, I love to play video games and have fun. I even have my own YouTube channel where I show people how blind people play video games. I've also gotten into UGR, and I really want to create a movement to show the developers of Dual Links that there is a blind community of UGR dualists who want to play with the sighted community. We have our own small blind community of dualists, but my dream is eventually to create an interface where the blind and sighted can freely duel each other without worries about sight or no sight so I can bring smiles to everyone. I have ADHD and sometimes I zone out for like a second or two when I'm doing things. When I was working construction I'd bust my freaking butt and always get my work done but I was told that they were thinking about firing me for standing around which I never did. So I started taking Ritalin for work and it just fricks you up even worse. Now when I'm off of it I can't get crap done or even freaking feel emotion. You may or may not have already done this, but you absolutely need to mention that to your psychiatrist. I've had similar feelings before, and I had to change drugs once, but it was 100% worth the conversation. I apologize if I'm telling you stuff you already know, but I figured I'd risk it on the off chance this ends up being helpful. Dyslexia. We have a scheme in the UK which a lot of business use. Essentially it gives anyone with a disability such as dyslexia a guaranteed interview if they have the minimum requirements for a position. I've never ever had an interview after declaring my dyslexia to a company organization, including the NHS, despite them proactively promote this policy. From my experience, if you declare it, you're off the table. The whole scheme is just a way for a company to look good but not actually commit. Agreed. I'm dyslexic in the UK. I remember my year 5 teacher advising me and my parents to not broadcast the dyslexia. I'm named after my great-grandfather who immigrated from Yugoslavia back in the 1890s, so I have a very Slavic first and last name. As an American, I've been discriminated and insulted many times by boomers who grew up during the Red Scare. Basically they confuse me for being a Russian communist or have a hatred for Slavs. I have been told to go back to Russia and to change my name to something American. It's weird how openly strangers and even my co-workers can say this crap. I am autistic. I was teaching swim lesson as a part of a fundraising program. I've taught for multiple years at that point and have never had a complaint about my conduct. One day one of the parents of my students filed a complaint saying I was awkward, didn't make eye contact and made her feel uncomfortable. That parent was a child development prof at my small college who did research into autism. I told my advisor, who happened to be the disabilities advocate on campus, and she sent the parent a very strongly worded email. The parent ended up apologizing to me in person and withdrawing her kid from swim lessons. Keep in mind my boss at the time said there was nothing wrong with my conduct and I was perfectly polite and professional. It's nice knowing that not all employers are discriminatory. I tried to be a nanny for a little bit. Things would go great with the family for a bit, then someone would find out that I'm Jewish, ethnically, and I'd be fired for something unrelated that was definitely an anti-Semitic stereotype. This happened twice. The first time it was the Iranian grandmother who was so sweet before I told her I'm Jewish. Like, she absolutely loved me before. She opened up, we had girl talk, we openly talked about politics. She respected my education around child development and thought I was great with the kids. She asked about my family. I told her about my Oma being born in Auschwitz, and suddenly I was lazy, stupid, and probably stealing from them. The second family was an American dad and a Ukrainian mother, though to be fair, I should have known the Ukrainian woman would have been unhappy with me being a Jew. But the woman was a doctor who spoke 3 languages, so I thought maybe she'd be a little more sensible. Nope. I worked as a special needs nanny for her 13-year-old boy with total synapses disconnect, her 3-year with autism, and their seemingly neurotypical 1-year-old. Things went great for months. I did a lot of overtime and extra work for them. They sold me one of their cars. I did a lot of tech support for them. It seemed to be a really great fit. Then, a hurricane knocked a tree branch into one of the downstairs bedrooms, and instead of dealing with it, they just shut the door and let the mold grow in. Despite being very wealthy, after a month of everyone being sick, she made a very dry joke about me putting a voodoo curse on them. I, stupidly, joked back I think I missed my synagogue's lesson on curses. She looked at me and went, "You're Jewish? Seriously?" And I said yes, ethnically. That was Thursday. On Sunday, she called me drunk, screaming about how I'm dirty and that I'm so dirty that it's probably why everyone is sick. I'm just so dirty that it's making everyone in the house sick. Yeah, so I guess I quit that one, but could you blame me? So that's the story of how I tried to use my degree and realized that while I love children, the adults and their families suck. Those children were lucky to have you while they did. I have achondroplastic dwarfism, the same form of dwarfism that we Man and Peter Dinklage have, for reference. Without a doubt, the worst thing about it isn't the condition itself, but how people can treat me because of it. It was particularly bad in high school. This was before the days of Game of Thrones, where the portrayal of Tyrion Lannister made everyone realize we are human beings. At that point, the go-to comparisons were Mini-Me and Oompa Loompas, and those comparisons were made constantly. I was physically bullied in school, to the point that I had bones broken, and I was psychologically bullied as well. It was pretty freaking crap in all honesty, and unlike the rest of my high school friends, I have no warm memories of that time. As an adult, it's not all peachy now, but it is significantly better, mostly because my interaction with children and teenagers has drastically reduced. But adults can suck as well. I get people taking photographs of me in public without my permission. I get people heckling me, patronizing me, ignoring me in conversation, and so on. I think the examples of people treating me differently can come from a variety of motivations, the most common of which is, ironically, the fear of insulting me. Some people really freeze up around me and don't know how to interact with me without doing something wrong, so they won't interact with me at all. Fortunately, outright malice is not common, and enough people mean well enough that I feel pretty content in my everyday life. It does definitely take a mental adjustment to realize how people perceive you, though, for better or worse. Astronomer here. I was the only woman in my undergrad physics class, and really enthusiastic about science, and more than one prof decided this meant I was into them because I kept coming to offices to ask questions. 2 profs tried to kiss me, and one was so creepy that I ended up filing a claim about his behavior to the sexual harassment office when I learned I wasn't the only person he had acted like that to. He was actually also legit famous and one of those scientists known to the public, and it was good I had paperwork because he was one of those exposed by the Me Too movement a decade later and is no longer at a university. I also barely survived my physics MSc by the skin of my teeth in that depth, so to speak. The prof who taught most of the first year MSc classes was an old 70-plus-year-old guy who was on the record for complaining in faculty meetings that the grades had been going down in his classes since more women were taking them, and at the end of fall semester he gave me D's in his 2 classes. However, if you read the rules, there were no actual required classes to get the degree, you just needed to pass the qualifying exam at the end of the year, and nominally those courses were to prepare you for the quals. So, what I ended up doing was signing up for 2 independent study classes instead of taking his, where I basically just did practice problems for the qualifying exam on my own, and passed. I faced sexism during my PhD years, but that's more subtle and I don't want to argue with Redditors about that today, and this is so intensely hard to reflect on sometimes because, I should be clear, I loved my undergrad department. Most people there were so wonderful, and I had so many amazing moments learning physics there. But wow, it gets so bittersweet thinking back on that time. I loved it, but there were also a lot of internalized things about what I would have to put up with to be a woman in physics that I would be horrified. We have to do better. Severe amelogenesis imperfecta. I'm suffering in almost every aspect of life because of it. Don't Google it if you're sensitive to fricked up teeth. Once my job called security on me because I'm black. I literally walked from my station to the bathroom and back, and they called in to see if I was causing problems. I liked that job and worked mostly by myself at a hotel shop, but the idea that people were watching me and expecting me to do wrong definitely made me uncomfortable and weary of how I was perceived. Not sure if this counts as discrimination, but here goes anyway. I have MHE, when is like the opposite of osteoporosis, so I have random lumps of extra bone. As a result, I can't bend my hips enough to sit without a chair. In 5th grade, the PE teacher had a substitute. He had everyone line up against the wall and sit down for something. Don't remember what. Well, I told him I couldn't. Got shoved to the floor. That hurt, because it was only a month after leg surgery. Then I tried getting back up. Failed. Got sent to the principal. He said just tell him and sent me back to class. Guess he missed the part about I already did. Just went back and the jerk of a pay substitute was like, why are you back already? Go back. So I went back. Told the principal, he wouldn't listen. Got to stay there for the rest of the day, chillin' with the principal. Cool principal. 3 years ago I was moved out of a role at my work because they wanted more men in that specific department. A department that only had 3 other women in it and 9 men. It wasn't a guys either. This is what they told me, and I was just moved sideways into the same role in a different department. I saw this happen in a department a few years ago. New, Japanese, Manager came in and it took less than a year to fire all women and replace them with young Japanese guys, and the company watching it and claiming that they were an equal opportunity employer. I look and sound about 10 years younger than I am. Short female, mid-20s, but due to my skill I've only been in managerial roles at work. My last workplace no one took me seriously. I was talked down to by staff and my team of 18-20 years olds. I wasn't allowed to talk to clients. Then I took in my 13 years old brother and my boss explained to me my big responsibility now. Since his mother was abusing him I had to call Child Protective Services and they spoke down to me. Even saying, does your mother know you're calling about him? No school in my area would accept him without it, and I had to see a lawyer who questioned my age halfway through the appointment after calling me a young lady. I replied that I'm 25 and she literally said, oh, not young then. An interview with Bro's principal had him talk down to me, ask about what I did, media marketing and events manager, and eventually he asked my age. If I forget my id, I can't go in liquor stores. Teachers at my brother's school have asked whose class I'm in. Even people my age don't take me seriously. It's not a huge thing, but it sets me way back in my career, which is really important to me. My brother is a brain tumor survivor, and he seems fine, not disabled. On first glance, you can start to sense his disability after talking to him a bit. Since he's lost a lot of his short-term memory ability, he might have to ask your name a few times if he's just met you. He also lives on disability since he can't learn a new job anymore, and he tends to get frustrated and lash out a bit if he gets called on his unintentional lapses. He also has a service dog, who serves as his reminder to take his own medication, which he schedules along with his regular feeding of the dog. Several times he's been kicked out of stores when he goes in with the dog, even if the dog is wearing a service vest, because he is obviously not blind. I have Asperger's, so social interaction has always been difficult for me, even into adulthood. At school I was almost always alone. One of my habits is that I would sometimes flap my arms when I got antsy or nervous about something. I was regularly made fun of, called a retard on a few occasions, and in 3rd grade got beat up a couple of times. I always felt alone, and once the bullying started, I was hesitant to try and make friends with anybody. Currently working on a book about Asperger's and my experiences living with it to try and help other people who have it, mainly to tell them that they're not alone. I've long since accepted it and nowadays I'm a lot better, but school sucked. Some of us just flat out can't socialize well. I'm sure it'll be amazing. I live in a second world country and I swear bullying throughout school was a nightmare. It was not just words. Once a group of guys hit me so strong that my arm ended up almost black. It was like this since elementary school. University went a lot better. Until now I'm still struggling. I hope your work can help us to accept each other. I'm from Eastern Europe. It's not as bad as a discrimination against black people or against Muslims with large beards and obviously traditional white clothes, but I can definitely feel it. I spend years watching films and trying to recreate accents used by actors. Right now you'd have a hard time telling I come from outside of UK, but you definitely will not be able to place my accent. In UK you can tell from what region or city a person is by accent. So that wasn't easy, but it helped. Next thing I did was change my name. Now I am far more likely to get hired. Yeah, a few years ago I worked in the UK. I told my parents that everyone there was from a different country and that I worked with lots of Romanians or Bulgarians. They told me, oh my god, be careful they don't steal your stuff. It's still one of the best work experience I had. It was super fun and I met a lot of awesome people. Plus I learned how to say happy birthday in Romanian. I have to have a service dog. It's for autism. If you want me to tell you what it's like having autism, just ask. Back to the service dog. It's a German Shepherd, so it is not hyperallergenic, which means I make a lot of people have an allergic reaction to her, and she sheds so much it's not normal. It's also hard to get a job when you have a service dog. I spent 1.5 years looking for a job. Luckily I got one at Home Depot. Apparently German Shepherds are violent, so people shrink away in terror. My dog mothers her own toys. Totally violent. I know it's more like a life story, but hey, now you know some of the pains people with service dogs do. My mom is Mexican. In a weird twist of genetics, I came out looking very white and generically American, so I've luckily not had to experience much backlash because of it, but some of the stories my mom has told me break my heart. My mom has been a nurse for almost 30 years, is very good at her job, has been given numerous awards and accolades, etc., but literally has to lie about her ethnicity to be taken seriously. She's been in the US long enough that while she still has an accent, it's not immediately identifiable, so there's been times where she has to tell people she's Greek or Italian because they will expressly say they don't want a Mexican nurse. She works and lives in a major US city that has a high Latino population and still is not accepted. There was another time she went to one of my sister's parent-teacher conferences. My mom had never met the teacher before because she usually is working, so the teacher had never met my mom before. The teacher started going through the usual things, and then before my mom could say anything or ask any questions, the teacher turned to my sister and said, "Could you translate for me? I know your mother probably doesn't understand." My mom speaks English better than most native speakers. As an Argentinian, I've experienced the exact opposite in Mexico. I seem to look very American, and people tried to sell me stuff in English, and even when I told them that I spoke Spanish as a first language, they insisted talking to me in English. I've had several great fledgling relationships. Dates end abruptly once I revealed I'm bipolar. Apparently being bipolar automatically means I'm gonna be abusive, dramatic, violent, manipulative, you name it. Apparently bipolar causes it. In reality, I just get spurts of productivity, mania, and some periods where I want to die. Depression. Nothing too crazy, lol. I feel this. I actually had a nurse call CPS on me after giving birth to my first child, claiming I was abusive and neglectful. Turns out the B just had a problem with moms with bipolar disorder. My height. I'm a dude standing at 163, and literally 95% of people who meet me think I'm that much less capable. Everybody makes fun of my height. When I was younger, I played chess and people were laughing at me cause I couldn't reach the table. Gotta admit though, I played for my country, so revenge was sweet when they left their tables crying. Just last week a few female friends of mine literally thought I would be weaker than them because of my height. I played rugby and football for school. Which brings me to the best thing. People get defensive offended when I make jokes about my height, but everything is all good when they make fun of my height. Discrimination wise, coaches don't even look at me when I take my trials for teams cause being short has natural disadvantages, and it's a lot harder to get jobs. Shorter people make great RBFB, lower center of gravity. Moved from Ireland to the UK, discovered that as an Irish person in the UK, Irish sounding name, very slight accent, my professional career's upward prospects were, shall we say, limited. I wasn't the only one either to notice this in that sector. IT consulting, where you dealt a lot with clients, management execs. Our management generally absolutely preferred people who were white, male, British, preferably with posh accents, as did some of the clients. I quit and moved somewhere the frick else after realizing my career was going nowhere fast. I don't know if it counts as I am successfully being able to control my worst flaws, but I'm autistic, high functioning. A classic trait of autism is being rude to other people without realizing. When I was a tween, I often had to deal with people getting mad at me while I was having a normal conversation with them. As far as I knew, I wasn't doing anything wrong until my family complained to the psychologist that I was very rude. Another classic trait is pushing other people away with a social behavior without realizing. I don't have friends, only acquaintances. I used to have friends when I was in primary school, but as they grew older they started avoiding me, and since then making friends has remained difficult. To get a good grasp of how unpopular I am, I'm consistently picked last in pay unless someone has an even worse disability like Downs. As an autistic person, you're one target for bullying. It should come as no surprise that I was bullied into depression, anxiety and a trauma of school breaks. I shut myself inside the classroom whenever possible. When I was 16, I was asked by a school secretary if I was normal. Her actual words, "I know children and teens can be cruel, but adults should know better." Rant over. Thanks for asking this. I'm a bit weird. They give me different DX. Everything from depression, PTSD, borderline schizophrenia, A lot of times it's an invisible disability, and when everyday people find out, it's everything from just flat out telling you you're lazy or lying. It makes job hunting hard because that's usually what people assume. Everyone has anxiety, you're just lazy. I hide hearing voices and stuff well and hardly talk about it. The worst discrimination though has been at the hands of so-called professionals who don't believe your story, lie to you about meds, or coerce you even though you are in no danger to self or others, laugh at your dissociation or gender confusion, assume you're a druggie or doing something dishonest, laugh at you or share personal secrets. I know there's good psychologists out there, but honestly, screw them all. This is so minor compared to what everyone else on here is saying, but it's legitimately the only time I've ever been discriminated over something I have no control over. When I was in high school, I was in an introduction to theater class as an elective. There was a scene in a skit we were performing where I was paired up with a girl, and we had to hold hands. We were supposed to be a romantic couple in this skit. When I held the girl's hand, she said "you" really loud, and the teacher just laughed and said "come on, that's not nice." After the skit was over, when she walked away from me, she whispered under her breath, but it was loud enough for me to hear what she was saying. She told her friend I was so ugly, it grossed her out to hold my hand. Personally, I don't consider myself ugly, but I had no control over whether she thought I was ugly or not. High school girls can be really mean. I can't exactly be too mad at this, seeing as I'm the only one in my family age group to be successful. I work in aviation. I went to school. I have my own toolbox and everything. I don't borrow a lot of things, and even if I need something I'll buy it. With normal sensible people, when they ask what I do, it's always a wow factor, which I love. The thing that bothers me is when they learn I'm native. It's like, wow, that's great that you managed to get a job like that. Almost like they'd expect less of me just because of my race. I'll openly admit, I'm retarded and my brother and cousins and nieces are mostly idiots. But what my workplace loves about me is I'm determined and work hard. I've worked weekends with no pay before. But for people to imply that there's no way I would have worked where I'm at because of my race kinda sucks. I mean, I try my hardest. That's all it is really. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.